FS1 is making some significant changes to a bunch of the shows that are on their air. And so this first got reported over at The Athletic by Andrew Marchand, who's usually at the forefront of a lot of this news. Joy Taylor is out. She is out at Fox Sports. So we're going to actually, let's throw it there really quick. I'm in respect, I guess, out of respect for the paywall that is known as The Athletic vis-a-vis the New York Times. We won't show all of this story, but we are going to kind of dive into some of the details. Joy Taylor is out at Fox Sports as the network cancels 3 shows, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. If you remember, there was quite the scandal earlier this year, right? Or was it at the end of last year? I think it was earlier this year. I still can't believe it's like halfway through July. Feels like the year just started. But there was the scandal involving Joy Reid a few months ago, where there was this idea that there was somebody who was a higher up that maybe she was trying to get on the good side we'll say, and she may or may not have said some things that could have gotten her into a lot of hot water. And then there were some things about Emmanuel Acho, and there's some allegations there about the two of them, and it wasn't a great situation. And we broke it down on the show, in fairness, and we did a great job breaking it down on the show. But I will tell you, I am not surprised by this, because when that news broke, and again, you can go back to the podcast feed, or you can go to the Russ Joy Show YouTube channel. You can find the episode where I dove into all the allegations, and there were some really concerning things in there that Joy Reid allegedly said that it's not ideal. We're not rehashing it here, but I'm not surprised that she wasn't brought back to FS1. But there are 3 shows that are now effectively donezo. One of them we're actually going to cite on today's show, oddly enough. But the one that is the probably the biggest headline is Speak, which is a show that she's been hosting with Paul Pierce. And it's a show that also has featured Keyshawn Johnson. So that show is gone. A show called The Facility is also gone. We've talked about that show before. LaShawn McCoy has appeared on that show. That one is also done. And Craig Carton, who left a job at WFAN in New York to go and start this like morning show on FS1. It got rebranded at some point. I had no idea. That's like how out of it I've been on FS1. But his show now got canceled as well. So I'll just kind of hit some of the big notes here. But as I said, like Taylor co-hosted Speak with Keyshawn Johnson and Paul Pierce. Her contract was up, not renewed by Fox Sports. There's no clarity here on Keyshawn Johnson or Paul Pierce's status with Fox Sports, with FS1. If Paul Pierce's contract is up, is there a lot of value to keep him there? I don't know. Would NBC be interested in bringing in Paul Pierce? Could ESPN look to bring him back? I'm not sure. Keyshawn, I thought, was an interesting one here. And like maybe if Keyshawn, can he find a spot on one of the panels on Fox NFL Sunday? Could you find a role for him with college football? Can you find a role with him if you're one of the other networks that has rights to college football or to pro football? Like, could that happen? It remains to be seen. I'm not positive yet. But it's interesting. These are all interesting notes. Now, as this mentions, Colin Cowherd, The Herd, remains at noon. First Things First with Nick Wright, Chris Broussard. That show remains at 3 o'clock. They're probably going to do some more content in the place of the 3 shows that have been axed. But it is kind of an interesting shift. And Craig Carton's show getting axed is pretty wild. Will he go back to WFAN? No one seems to know. That show, if you remember, that network or radio station, it was kind of humming along for a good long while. It seemed a little bit surprising that he would have left that gig to go to FS1, but he chose to, and now it hasn't worked out. Other notable names who've been involved with the facility, which is now also canceled. Emmanuel Acho, who we talked about on the show. Chase Daniel, who had some of the worst commentary on the Eagles this past season. James Jones, LaShawn McCoy. Where do those guys go? Where do they end up? Are they going to try to build new programming around those guys? Who the hell knows? But it's interesting. And the reason that I bring up these shows is because we are actually going to cite a couple of them, because if nothing else, Fox Sports has figured out a way to give this show a little bit of context throughout the football season, because there have been some atrocious takes on your team, your town, your Philadelphia Eagles. The idea of the former athletes being the guys, and sometimes the ladies on these panels, but often it's guys. The former athlete being the crux and the focal point of these shows. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. You see guys like Dan Orlovsky, who played in the past, finding a lot of success on ESPN. We'll actually hear from him a little bit later on in the show as well. You have some guys who get themselves in a little bit of hot water. Ryan Clark has gotten himself into a couple of things in the last month or so that have been kind of questionable. Shannon Sharp, most notably, former player who got kind of embroiled in a scandal of sorts of his own. Pat McAfee has probably the biggest sports show, biggest daytime sports show in the country, former player. The whole show's built around him. But when you get into these studio setups, these studio shows where there's the one host and then 3 or 4 of these guys that try to, jockey back and forth, unfortunately, it feels like if you don't have the charisma or if you don't have the insight, you then have to kind of go to what's going to be the biggest take I can drop at any given time to then get a little bit of shine on the show, to get a little bit of spotlight on the show. And it's tricky because some of the guys that I rattled off, they're like, Emmanuel Acho has had a few good points sometimes, and then a lot of really dumb takes. Chase Daniel has just had some egregiously bad takes on the Eagles especially. I don't know why. LaShawn McCoy's been a little bit hit or miss. Will Fox look to figure out a way to keep those guys on and maybe try to build a show around them a little bit differently? Maybe. I just don't know what the... Fox Sports is in this weird thing, right? Colin Cowherd's show does well, right? Because it's a simulcast. It's got TV. It's got a radio component. He's still a very well-liked guy, well-respected guy. Not everybody loves him. Not everybody hates him. He certainly gets the conversation going. He's very good at what he does. I actually think he's the best one who does it at a national scale in that kind of role. Nick Wright figures out ways to get people talking about his show. There's a reason that show hasn't been taken off, and it's at 3 o'clock, which is an important time. It continues to work. These morning shows are not giving a good enough lead-in to Colin Cowherd, and then, after Cowherd's show, you go to Nick Wright's show. Those morning shows did not do a good enough job of building an audience throughout the morning to kind of lead into the herd. So then it makes sense as a network executive that you'd say, all right, you know what? Let's kind of shake this thing up a little bit. Let's try to change what these panels are. Maybe you're changing the dynamics. I don't think you're going to get into like an X's and O's kind of show with these guys. I don't know what they're going to do. But I don't blame Fox Sports for saying, all right, it doesn't work. You have to change it up. But there are a lot of big personalities, a lot of big names. Mark Schlereth, I guess is going to also be out there. Is he going to get kicked from the Breakfast Ball show that was formerly the Craig Carton show? Is he going to land somewhere? Who the hell knows? It's a weird time at FS1. It is. Like, do you guys remember when FS1 started? Because I do. I remember being in an apartment. I think it was right when I started teaching. I remember watching Crowd Goes Wild, because remember, it couldn't be The Crowd Goes Wild, because that was a show in Australia. It was Crowd Goes Wild, and Regis Philbin was the host. And I remember when FS1 switched. I think it actually started, the FS1 first show was Crowd Goes Wild. It was an afternoon show. There was like I forget what the channel prior to it was, but like the branding changed, and then it launched into this new afternoon show. And I remember sitting there being like, why the hell is Regis Philbin hosting a sports show? But it was actually kind of fun. That had, I guess Jason Gay was on that panel. What was her name? I'll figure it out. There were a few people on the panel that were like interesting, and they'd usually have like a comedian or somebody would come on, and it felt like a different take on a sports show. And it didn't ultimately end up working out, but it's fine. Colin Cowherd's kind of figured out a way to like make himself the guy at FS1. Nick Wright, to some extent, has kind of made himself an invaluable piece of that puzzle. Like, if Nick Wright's show were to get canceled and he lands on ESPN, like, what exactly is he going to do? It's going to be a lot of the same kind of, talking head segments. It's going to be the same kind of, like, round table discussion. I don't think anything's really going to change. Colin Cowherd's figured out a way to get Fox to continue to pay him when ESPN reportedly has been, like, willing to offer him a bag to come back to, Disney. And it hasn't worked. And so he's stayed over at Fox, and he's very happy. And he launched his own like podcast network and vertical and everything. And he's finding a lot of success. But at FS1, they've got to figure out what those mornings are going to look like. I'm not in a spot where I'd say that like any of the names that I kind of outlined there are must-haves if you're trying to rebuild that morning lineup. It almost feels like maybe you have to change things up. Like, why couldn't you do a morning show that's a little bit more fun, a little bit less sporty, right? and try to go for like more of a general morning show that plays well on TV, that maybe is a simulcast? Could you see a Fox Sports 1 say, all right, let's come into an arrangement with a leading sports market and just simulcast their show? I don't know who has one that you would do it with. I can't imagine WFAN's going to, bend over backwards to try to do a simulcast on FS1 or vice versa, but it would be an interesting take. It's an interesting idea. I just don't know what they're going to do.